Hi and welcome everybody to our Global Childhood Seminar for October 2023. I'm going to start this seminar by acknowledging the land that we live, work and learn on here in Naarm, Melbourne. I want to pay my respects to the elders, past, present and emerging, and to acknowledge that the land's never been ceded and that this is an important time for us to be acknowledging this land right now. I want to acknowledge that it's been my own and other people's ancestors that have colonized this land and that we get to have the privilege of being here at the same time. I do want to also acknowledge the Indigenous people in the room and who might be online joining us or who might be watching this at a later date. So just a little quick word about the later date part. This is being recorded. It will be uploaded to the YouTube channel for our Global Childhoods Research Hub, so you can disseminate it later on. We'll have Kate and Sarah, whom I'll introduce very shortly, do their talk, and then we can have some questions and answers after that. If you're online today, and I know we have some people online, some people from overseas have registered as well, as far away as Denmark, so that's very exciting for us. And it would be great to have some questions from the floor or from online afterwards if you want to. So I'm going to move into my introduction. I'm not going to introduce the SWISP lab because that's what Kate and Sarah are going to do. Associate Professor Kate Coleman is the co-lead of the SWISP lab with Sarah. Kate is a AARE co-convener of the Arts Education Practice Research SIG. I had to bring my notes because otherwise I get all of these details wrong. And she's the CI on the Learning with Land SSHRC project at the Melbourne Graduate School of Education, which is now the Faculty of Education. So I could have changed that. Kate is an academic convener for the University of Melbourne Peterscale campus, and her research and teaching is positioned in the intersection of art, design, digital practice, culture and data, as you'll see in this presentation. Dr. Sarah Healy is the co-lead of the SWISP lab with Kate. She's an inaugural Melbourne postdoctoral research fellow and is best known for her contributions in the fields of critical affect studies, digital methods and the post-humanities. Her interdisciplinary program of research involves research collaborations with academics, artists, practitioners, and educators from around the globe. And this is a really exciting presentation, so I just can't wait to get into it. And I will hand over to you.
Thank you. We're very grateful for the invitation from the Global Childhoods Research Hub. Forever onwards, we will refer to ourselves as we. Stacey Holman-Jones and Dan Harris contributed a lexicon about we search many, many years ago. And so SWISP Lab does enact we search. It thinks about the we's in many ways. And when we talk about we, there'll be some moments where some people who watch this might have been collaborators or co-researchers with us or co-teachers with us, or part of our residencies who will also include themselves in the we. Sometimes you'll hear us just talk about SWISP Lab, and that's mainly just us trying to direct something that is really massive and complex. So welcome into this. This is Young People in Anthropogenic Times. What we wanted to locate here was an expanding definition of global childhoods. One of the things that we're really trying to reimagine is how we understand childhood and youth, and really doing that with young people, how they actually locate themselves in ideas around youth and what that means. This is the globe of our project, which is why it's so massive. There are 7 sites in 7 countries. We're only going to today talk about Atlanta, Bengaluru and Melbourne. And we will come back in a year's time, invite or not. We're planting the seed to tell you about all the other countries when we get there next year. That this is multi-sited, and we use the concept of site as a CITE, SITE and a SIGHT, and that's one of the things that will kind of flip between. So when we think about that multi-sitedness, we're thinking in those 3 sites when we do that as well. So SWISP Lab are artographers in residence. And so that means that we literally pick up SWISP Lab and move between the sites. And it's in the moving between those sites that these things start to come into action. And our witness or becoming witness actually starts to play out. And it's in a hackathon, or what we'll call hack, that will introduce that starts to make sense. This is our Omeka site that will take you into our data. It's a way of thinking with data all the time, and that it's a data-centric project thinking about data with young people, trying to make sense of the crises that they currently live in, the crises that we find ourselves in, and the crises that they are really asking for time to also make sense of, without often being given a place or time to do that. So when we're here within the Global Childhoods Research Hub, this is us sitting inside this beautiful mapping from the hub. It's here that we try and introduce the idea of the expanded definition of childhoods to include young people up to the age of 24. And as proposed by the United Nations, who, while acknowledging diverse definitions, officially define youth as those aged 15 to 24. With 1.2 billion individuals aged 15 to 24 globally at this moment in time, constituting 16% of the population and projected to rise to 23% by 2030, this demographic is a significant force and must be included in the conversations about the future of the planet. So if we start to think about that expanded definition and thinking with 24, the United Nations is still consulting about what the definition might look like to the age of 28, now that neuroscience has enabled us to understand the brain better of young people. What might that expanded definition of global childhoods achieve if we start to locate our thinking in these anthropogenic times? So, as Sonia said, here's SWISP Lab. We stole this slide from Marcia's presentation a couple of weeks ago, but it did locate our lab in a particular way. So I will tell you a little bit about SWISP Lab. SWISP Lab facilitates hackathons which begin with climate stories of young people living in diverse geopolitical locations. The stories, often not just individual experiences, but also those of entire communities and families, shape our understanding of how we coexist within the world and how we might come to coexist differently. In Bengaluru, the climate stories were waterly. Thank you. With much talk about the sorrowful disappearance of leeches dancing on the forest floor due to the late monsoonal rains. You will hear more about those leeches as we go. The hackathons centre around a purposely designed Hacking the Anthropocene kit that orient young people towards speculative restoring of the Anthropocene through combining methods. These methods include emotion mapping, digital play, hacking cultural stories, tree walks, badges and zines, and many more. And we'll walk you through each of those methods as we go. For anyone that's been taught by Sarah and I, you will be accustomed to these methods because it's here that they have been developed, particularly located here in the Faculty of Education. A major outcome of this in 3 years' time, when we've visited all 7 countries, will be a pluricultural climate curriculum co-designed with young people, for young people, across 7 science galleries in 7 countries, including 3 in the Global South. This pluricultural climate curriculum is located in a fully immersive virtual world in Mozilla hubs called Speculative Wanderings in the Metaverse, or what we'll call SWIM.
So the Anthropocene, it's a contested term, but also a helpful term. It renders visible new architectures of time and matter, and this is drawing on Catherine Yusoff's work, both sedimenting existing genealogies of global world space and radically reorganising the imagination of the scope and material duration of what the human is in and through time. So what Yusoff is talking about is the pervasiveness of gendered and racialized settler colonial logics that continue to extract knowledge, extract labor, extract materials, and extract life itself. what this makes clear is that the anthropogenic times we live in, whether you agree with the concept of the Anthropocene or not, are not merely about global warming, but encompasses the idea of climate in every sense of the word. And we're not just talking about the weather. So we're also talking about the racialized, gendered, and as Catherine was saying, settler colonial climate that has led to this historic moment. So hence our inclusion of projects also in the SWISP lab of like Othello on Trial, which addresses gender-related violence and historic racism in the present through a theatre and education project, which goes on to challenge colonial scripts of life. And the way that Othello on Trial turns up for us is as theatre in a box and theatre in a box career. And this is one of the outcomes. In Othello on Trial, playwright in residence, criminal law professor Dr. Adrian Howe rewrites Shakespeare's Othello, or the tragedy of Desdemona, the wife, and places Othello on trial in a contemporary court to dramatise the question of a gendered and racialised justice system rooted in colonial literature. So through this system, men truly do get away with murder. It is this work that generated one of SWISP Lab's methods, which we call hacking cultural stories. The method involves identifying plots and themes from wider social contexts and rewriting them to explore what we call justices, futures, and activisms.
So it is here that we locate artography. Artography is not something added ad hoc at the time of research dissemination. It's thoughtful, it's an enacted way of knowing, being, and doing, and we're living inside the inquiry. And that inquiry is continuous in its affective flows. So it's continuously shifting, continuously morphing, and we live inside it as well as it living around us. So entering into a term that we keep locating around, the pluri, and this might not have been something that you might have thought of before. So Yusuf's conical figuration of deep time might also be thought of as a kind of pluritemporality, a way of conceptualizing time that connects to a range of pluri-scholarship that is anchored in design theory and practice. In Designs for the Pluriverse, Arturo Escobar presents a new vision of design theory and practice aimed at channeling design's world-making capacity toward ways of being and doing that are deeply attuned to justice and the earth. Noting that most design, from consumer goods and digital technologies to built environments, currently serves capitalist ends, Escobar argues for the development of an autonomous design that eschews commercial and modernising aims in favour of more collaborative and place-based approaches. Here we position artography again for you. Artography radically transforms the idea of theory as an abstract system, distinct and separate from practice, towards an understanding of theory as a critical exchange that is reflective, responsive, and relational. Artography is a method and a methodology of embodiment, of continuous engagement with the world, and one that interrogates yet celebrates meaning. It involves understanding reality as a process of iterative becoming, where, and I am quoting Berard in Dolphine with Van der Tuin, all bodies, including but not limited to human bodies, come to matter through the world's iterative intra-activity, its performativity. This is where SWISP Lab formally launches with the help of AARE funding and a Dyson Fellowship from the University of Melbourne at the Climate, Art and Digital Activism Festival of Ideas in 2022. Nearly a year ago this week, it was a major event that brought together interdisciplinary practitioners and scholars for 4 whole days of practice and theory. And this marked the first of our residencies within SWISP. With the support of a University of Melbourne India diversification grant, the SWISP residency in Science Gallery began. Here we work methodologically as co-researchers with young people through hacking the Anthropocene to be able to co-design what will emerge as a pluriversal climate curriculum. 4 3-hour workshops create the conditions for coming to know between art and science and becoming with artography in pluridisciplinary sites to mediate possibilities with other young people. The hackathons pivot around the Hacking the Anthropocene kit, or hack, a co-designed toolkit created with young people. Hack guides our encounters with young practitioners towards speculative reimagining of the Anthropocene through living inquiry. 2 really important residents exist within these residencies. And so when we talked about the concept of research and the multiplicities of that research, Jen and Yvette are key to the ways that the residencies in SWISP function, with a designer in residence and a metaverse builder in residence who are analysing, rendering, co-producing, co-creating along with us throughout the whole journey.
Here we go. Could have watched a little more of that, but moving right along. So here's another shot of the kit that Jen was just opening on the video. Beside it is a graphic of the process, which involves introducing the idea of inputs. In our hackathons, inputs involve a whole lot of things. We have our partner data, we have slam poetry, we have artist works, we have MECE data, we have Senti-One data, which is a social listening platform that we work with and have a cooperation with from Hungary. And that's from my postdoctoral work. We have generative AI, we have local environment, and we also have just serendipitous events that happen at the time. So the Anthropocene curriculum is what really started us, that came about last year, and that also always features, and that was co-designed between artists and curators, I think, at Science Gallery about a year ago. So when doing the hack, we conceptualize it computationally as a CPU. It involves hackers, artists and practitioners and residents, and also methods. The methods are conveyed through methods cards primarily, and these are key at this point, and one of SWISP Lab's major contributions to the field. And then finally, we have outputs that feed back into the inputs for the next hack. So it's a constantly iterative, cyclical performance, really. So let's have a look at these things. Inputs in the blue, bit of CPU going on in the middle there in the pink, and then some outputs in the blue on the other side. This was early on in our first hack, and these have expanded exponentially now, but it gives you an idea of artifacts that come about while we're doing this work.
And they are for us and the young people that we're working with. One serendipitous one, which is beautiful, is the work of Sydney-based photographic artist Anne Zaholka, that literally one day while we're in Bengaluru, flicks me a text message and says, "Kate, you're in Bengaluru. I've got this whole body of work. I'll give it to you. Take it to the gallery with you." And so Zaholka World, which currently has just been on show in Melbourne, lands inside the input.
And they're constantly updating and changing as well, which is really good to work with. So what do these cards look like? Well, they all look the same on the back. We turn them over and we've got emotion mapping, we've got emoji stories, hacking cultural stories, walking the hundreds, and climate comedy. That's the first 6. There's 13 in total. The next 6, zines, photography and film, digital play. And then these next 3 came out of our last hack and were designed by the Bengaluru carbon mediators. So, oops. Let's get quizzy, collage it, and performance. And then we have an off-piste card. And this gets played if during a hack somebody wants to pretty much go off-piste. And if it's successful, then that then becomes one of the new cards. So this is how Let's Get Quizzy, Collage It and Performance came about.
Performance came with something also really special when we talked with Stellark about what we'd been doing in Bengaluru. It's the best bit of name dropping in the world. We were talking about what we'd been doing, and Stellark started telling us about the ways that he plays a type of performance card. And so the combination of Science Gallery Bengaluru mediators with Stellark and us creates the beautiful performance card. Stellark's version of the performance card is not played with an actual card, but he said that he was stealing it back. So it was a nice bit of thinking about what participatory co-design can actually enable.
Which is a nice segue, Kate.
A beautiful segue. An opening. Cartographers call these openings, and they happen all the time in research if you are waiting for the bit that allows you to see the change. So an opening, and I want to locate that here with Professor Eve Tuck. Eve locates that doing participatory research means thinking differently about who has expertise, whose expertise matters, whose questions matter, who makes theory, and whose meaning making counts. Doing participatory research as a scholar employed by a university means thinking about how I spend my time with people and how I want to teach students to do their work in relation to the communities that are important to them. Those words said by Eve could easily have been said by us. And so they're more beautifully stated by her, but it allows an opening for us to think about where those contradictions, resistance, where those movements in knowledge creation and knowledge co-construction might occur. So a bit of participatory co-design. This is 2 weeks ago in the studio. We're going to kind of talk to you about this hack 3, but it's really, really fresh. And so we haven't spent a lot of time within it, but it was one of the most insightful experiences in a hackathon with teenagers. So through pluridisciplinary initiatives, our work with young people creates the conditions for young people to play an active role in addressing the pressing challenges of our anthropogenic age, acknowledge that collective anti-colonial action, disciplinary thinking, and collaborative knowledge generation are crucial for shared pluriversal possibilities on a livable and more socially just planet, particularly in these times of crises. Alongside hacking, the following activities occur in our research protocol: observation, recorded in field notes, reflective journals, and tanglegrams, as you see our young people doing above. And a beautiful tanglegram from Suzanne Tristar that's currently on show in Science Gallery Melbourne in the Dark Matters exhibition. 2, collaborative making and responding, structured by selected hacking methods that you have just seen. 3, group discussions such as talking circles, structured by our riff on Project Zero's Think, See, Wonder that we practice as sense, think, wonder, fear, hope. 4, documentation, filmic, photographic, sound bites, illustrations, field notes. 5, the building of the Mozilla Hub's metaverse in collaboration with the digital artist in residence. And 6, feedback loops, and the protocol begins over.
So we're now bringing you to the point of diving into one of the hacks. And we're going to start with hack 1, not the middle, as some good Deleuzian scholars in the room might be wanting to start in the middle, but we'll disappoint you today. So here in Bengaluru, SWISP Lab were in residence for nearly 2 weeks at the pop-up science gallery at the National Centre for Biological Science. We'll jump into this one and explore a lot of detail, and then visit the other 2 hacks that have just occurred since then in a little more sketchy detail. It is the starting point, and the starting point really is around carbon in anthropogenic times, which for us is the nexus of the human-land technology relations that connects all our work in the lab. And then a really strong cross thread in this is climate stories. So here's just a montage of SWISP Lab in residence with carbon mediators and SWIM, which is our Mozilla hubs over there. And one of the first things we do when we arrive is to locate ourselves in-site and on-site and connect with people and local environment wherever it may be and whoever it may be with. We like playing the walking card for this. So here's the walking card. What the carbon mediators did in this particular instance was create a walking protocol using the card as an invitation. At the same time, I played a different card myself as the resident and played the photography and film card and followed a carbon mediator, one of the young people, around working out a filming documentary protocol. And this is what Pooja and I put together. Yeah.
Somewhere in between.
Somewhere in between, you're just saying. What? That. So walking is data creation, walking is cartography. Playing the walking card is as much about developing a documentation protocol as it is about documenting in this instance for me. And here we've got some really beautiful cartographies that some of the other carbon mediators generated while playing the walking card, all creating different protocols. And we see this also as data creation. And these cartographies produce what Braidotti describes as theoretically based and politically informed readings of the present, while recognising that mapping itself is an experimental and a becoming.
So playing with the spaces between art and science in Bengaluru, our mapping of site opened the joy-filled, hope-filled, ridiculous, speculative, fun, and what that means for doing data inside artographic work. It was here that we landed in the excess, after the rupture or epistemic break. The concept we use here usually refers to an event in the history or practice of science involving a radical break or cut with previously ideological concepts. In the excess, we find epistemic possibilities. So when we're thinking about excess, we're going to take you into how we actually created that rupture. there was a moment when you are working predominantly with scientists or with master's degrees, that an epistemic rupture pretty much causes a full catastrophe of self. There's a whole moment of, what do you mean all the things that I thought were this are now not that? And how do we start to locate the rupture? We, at this instance, located it with another work from Science Gallery Atlanta by Carl De Silvo, who is a colleague at Georgia Tech, who does this beautiful work called Careful Coding. Carl's community data studio and installation within Justice at the Science Gallery Atlanta formed ongoing collaboration with Atlanta residents, through which participants explore how data can be collected, aggregated, shared, and displayed in the pursuit of local political agendas. What's important about this work is that it's resident-led. Residents decide what data to collect and what not to collect, what data to share and not share, and residents also set the agenda for the design work, what comes after. They work together to create tools and processes to support their data practices and then data creation. So from our own residency at Science Gallery Atlanta in April this year, we interrupted his site with our tiny activist badges, where we held a pop-up activist badge workshop, but we did those badges with magnet backs. There were these beautiful poles within, and you can see one of them holding the name of Carl's work, beautiful poles in the gallery that alongside the mediators, we located Justice tiny activisms within. A beautiful thing that we now know from that is that those tiny activists remain and are moved every time that work installation shifts. And they make sure that they go and take down all the badges, move the work, and then put all the badges back.
They've been consumed by Carl and his project. So it's time to step away from the excess. And one of the ways we do this is by playing the hundreds card to segue from data creation that we've just done through walking into mapping and coding and recoding. And here's a Padlet of the hundreds posted by the carbon mediators. We're just going to look, I was going to say two, but I think we're just going to look at one because
we don't have lots of time.
We don't have lots of time.
I'm going to perform it for you. Life's a chain of chaotic moments strung together, like little carbon atoms bonded with no sense of structure or form, or no discernment of an end. With a yearning to connect like those like themselves, they go. Is this an end, or is this the beginning of something new? 100s, otherwise, by Science Gallery carbon mediator Parvathy, an image generated by Parvathy and our SWISP Lab Deep Dream.
And here's another one, give you a brief moment. And this is Chatty G's response. We like to play with generative AI. Then returning to Yusuf, who asked us to consider the multiple broken worlds that have come before our current perceptions of ecological crisis, we now play you Jagath's 100.
I think of carbon, a piece of coal plops into my head. Its surface calm at places and anxious at others. There is calmness in what we call its potential, dried up juices of the past that can be unleashed at a moment's notice. Yet it is sitting now in the blank canvas of our mind, calm. There is anxiety at its edges. When it was being ripped apart from the earth, the pain of the axe against its surface. There is also anxiety about what it can unleash on the world if mishandled. Coal is calm, coal is anxious. It makes us calm, it makes us anxious. I think of carbon.
Okay, so how does this all begin? It's prompted by, what is the moment in time that you knew your climate story changed? Everyone takes a post-it note, and we work together with Professor Lisa Grocot's idea here, where we map stories through time, thinking with the past ahead of us. how might we actually use that to rethink where we are in our climate stories? This reverberation and lingering stays with us across the hack. This lingering of time is a resonating sound, and it continues on through memory, flowing and bouncing off space within the hackathon. The sound is constant, it niggles and prods, knowing, doing and relating, and it opens new possibilities with its subtle reminders. Here it's located in the Climate 100s, where they pull a post-it note story from the future, past, present, and bring it into their own narrative and develop another Climate 100s.
What is that word? This is
Harsha, you want to say
what? Dukham. It means sorrow. Why you want me to say?
because you are the asal Mallu. Fake Mallu.
What does that mean?
Kannada.
So, leeches dancing on the forest floor, I've written, is what I had translated. What the person told me originally was Jignegadu Jil Jil Anta Kunita Barbeku.
Barbeku is dance. Barbeku is come, no?
Come.
Oh, I don't understand what.
Literally, it would be leeches, Jil Jil,
Huh.
plus come bouncing.
Oh.
Say again.
Wow.
This is like a funny. Say it. Okay, go. Yeah.
Just
say that.
Jignegadu Jil Jil Anta Kunita Barbeku.
It's like a tongue twist. Leeches? Jignesh.
So we show you that because the leeches and the trans languaging around the leeches really indicates that not only were we in a pluricultural project, but in Bengaluru, it is incredibly pluricultural. And even within the room, again, the number of languages everyone spoke and the different places everyone came from, it really brought home how these things are really melding in different ways and nesting in beside each other.
So lingering with these reverberations, we begin to visualize through collaging. And this method is supported by that paper joint on Sydney Road. If you haven't been there, then you should go and find it. Who curate our brown bag collage packs for our zine making. It means that the packs are curated for us and we don't know what's inside. So it means in using collage's method that we're not in any way deciding upon the kinds of images that might be found, and we unpack the bags with them. And it is the most beautiful, joyful experience to pull apart each piece of paper that's been pieced together. So gazing at the collage zines allows us to weave thinking, making, relating, and doing in and out of all of the artifacts created, edited, and curated. And that gazing takes time. And then we open the zine library. The use of collaging as an arts-based method in this inquiry allows us to involve the researcher as participant, as researcher, and moving in and out of that by being able to identify compelling images, words, scrap, textured materials and fragments, and then extracting those materials from the original context and rearranging them in new displays, lingering with that resonating climate story. We use that paper joint as our collage bag maker to not sway the participants in our research. We also don't know what's inside the bag. Using images selected by a third party, such as that paper joint, keep the research team at a distance from those prompt materials.
we also do emerging stories, but I'm going to skip over this, I think. They're really beautiful, but we will have this up on Figshare and do some links, do some show notes for people who want to do a deeper dive later. The emoji stories are really beautiful, but and here's how the emoji stories and stories of different climate emotions, carbon emotions, anthropogenic emotions then fold back into the metaverse using David Rumsey maps, which is amazing if anyone has not yet used it.
Get it on your phone.
Yes. And then one of the things that come out of the hack is a carbon curriculum. We prefer to think of it as a career. Don't we?
Co-designed by Science Gallery Bengaluru mediators. So the data collection will happen in 1 month's time when we return to the newly opened Science Gallery in Bengaluru. When Sarah and I head back to India, as Eve Tuck reminds us, we return.
We have to return because the carbon mediators looked us in the eye and said, you are coming back, aren't you?
Yes,
And
they
we
were
were-
very specific. Don't come and do research with us if you don't come back and do the research.
Yes. So what came out of Science Gallery Bengaluru?
Yeah, we actually showed them this slide. Gratitude and gratitude circles were taught to us in Bengaluru. And knowledge around product and process. We have 3 new Hackio cards that we've showed you. We have 3 new sticker packs for our emoji stories. And we have a new way of thinking around what our partners look like. We have partners in Delhi. We have a major partner at Srishti University who would like us to return and teach our methodology across the university, and a larger climate eco network partnership that we'll return to with schools.
And then that all produces outputs that then become inputs. And so the cycle starts. So we go on to the next thing, but we have a little joke. Hey man, what's up?
I'm just going to tell you, I'm like the worst person the whole way through.
She's not playing.
You can just read the response. can't you?
Oh,
I'm the worst. Anyone that knows me goes, you're not funny in any way. You can't even read a joke.
okay.
But these climate comedy is really important and they break up continuously. And you can play that card at any time. And young people play that card all the time. And these jokes just get posted around and they start performing them, which I can't do.
And the really important part of the next hack we do that you're not going to get to see today, I'm really sorry, with Science Gallery Melbourne and us, and that was sponsored by Chartered Accountants Australia. And it was a big data hack. We had a comedian in residence who did some really beautiful work. And this was the question that we, with a whole bunch of undergraduate students from FATE, Faculty of Engineering
Architecture.
and Architecture, did together. That was pretty amazing. With these beautiful residents and a industry partner, Pernex. And then we had a hack with young school students who came in to do a design hack around the futures of learning, although we've really troubled the word futures in our work. And I don't know if we'd use that now.
No, and they don't like using it either.
So
They think that the future is up to them to fix. They literally speak like it and they don't want to use it as a term. They think that it's an adult word that we use and ask them to do things in. They really don't want to be a part of.
So it's more past, presence and possibilities is what we've now settled on around that. And
Our last
non-linear-
contribution to artography is an 8th rendering, something that hasn't necessarily been discussed in artography before, but we are contributing to the broader field around how we might understand non-linear time as an artographic rendering. We've been working within the cone of possibilities, and Hack 3 with those young people really located us within the cone. Instead of using the concept of futures, which we travel outward, we think instead of these impossible, possible, plausible, and probable. And what does that mean to live in at this moment in time? And how might we think differently with what occurs after?
and surface and deep time rather than near and far time, to try and break habitual ways of thinking about time has been quite important to us. And this is a gift from generative AI that came back and sent us a postcard from 2050 in response to a speculative fiction that we wrote to Gen AI. So a little more play going on. And I think that's another presentation for another day, Kate.
It's very hard to explain speculative practice architectures because it's not what you expect architectures to be. And without a really deep understanding of that positioning theoretically and analytically that we would take you to, 14-year-olds go there really fast though, and it's absolutely outstanding to take them into speculative inquiry and to be able to locate a different understanding of time within architecture, and that it has nothing to do with buildings, like the Anthropocene has nothing to do with the weather.
And everything to do.
And everything to do with the weather.
And back to our tiny little activisms that thread through all the work, another reverberation.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, did we have, I have to show this because Di Mulcahy's in the room and you will love this. These 13-year-olds
Yes.
came up with a digital, this is their future of learning. They wanted a distributed model of justice, and they wanted to have a badge that they could pin on that would work with AI and some way of sensing the environment to be able to indicate to you when justice is needed to be done. And to maintain your badge at a certain color, you had to do a certain amount of justice in your day, and then distributing justice actions out through the community. And then they built these little prototypes for it, and it was really beautiful. But they totally talked about this distributed model of justice that would sit alongside a geodesic dome that they would have to do school in, and special protective clothing.
The school jacket that keeps you alive if the school burns down.
And glasses that would be able to communicate to your therapist, because
Everybody does
therapy in the future, apparently. And the glasses would help communicate to the therapist your emotions as you were going along, especially if you're finding it difficult to communicate these emotions yourself. So these were pretty incredible prototypes that these young people come up with. And we have one last little.
We have to leave you with leeches because we started with leeches.
Yes.
So, have you guys heard the Badger song?
No.
Yeah, the Badger. So it's a whole song that goes Badger. It's very annoying. Yeah, it is like that. But so in the middle, it goes Badger, and then in the middle it comes mushroom, and then again goes Badger, and then snake or something like that comes. So I just did the same thing with leeches. So it goes leeches, rain, leeches, rain, and then it goes like that, and then in the middle goes drought. Then leeches gone, and then again rain, leeches.
You don't want to perform it for us? No. Oh, it's an actual badger.
Mushroom.
That's pretty fun.
The performance card.
Hope in crises.
Yes.
That's us.
Thank you.
I'm going to open up here for questions.
We can move out. Let's go from behind the horrible desk.
You
We
can
can move out.
I'll just stand there and
Yeah, you
use
can.
this computer for any online questions.
Okay.
Because
You like to
mine-
stand. I'm going to
Stand, you can sit.
And then you have
Oh, do I?
thingies on anyway.
We do, we can move.
Am
We
I
can
in?
dance.
Are there any questions from the floor or online? And the online I can take from here. And I can run around with the mic if you have questions.
Badges and the magnets. Is there a progression of the material that you were using in the making through the SWISP sessions?
No, because the badges have to be done on really thin paper, otherwise the machines get stuck.
Yes, but badges amplify badges. So it's not like you change material, but once you've made one, you get it, and then you can't stop making. And so you go from people taking some time. We use badges because it's actually a really fast way of drawing. If you ask someone to draw what they're thinking in research, A lot of people stop at drawing at certain ages in their art education because someone tells them they can't draw. It's one of those things like, I can't speak a language. So we don't touch it. We just draw really fast, and we're just making a badge. And so it feels like it doesn't have the same, you know, impact on things. And then they realize it does. And they start wearing them, and then they want more, and then they want more, until, you know, we had a photo of a kid, you know, they're literally, their whole chest is filled with all of their activisms. And then we ask them to think about where they put it. And so the thing about Atlanta, which was interesting, is that we could fill the whole of the university. Emory University is like a very particular STEM centre. It's got the CDC there. And so we just start putting justice activisms all over the campus. Kids here put them everywhere. In Bengaluru, they did the same. But it's a quick, fast drawing, and it then just amplifies. You go from 1 to 10 in a couple of minutes. We take 100 with us, usually on a trip, and 100 are gone in days. But it's a really important bit of moving out of drawing into activating through drawing. And it's just, it seems quite simple, but it takes a while to get you there, and then off you go.
It builds community.
And then you turn up with all the paper already drawn. So they come the next day with like 20 drawings. I've got 20 badges ready to make. And you're like, okay, let's go. And they just start that. We literally carried a badge machine to Bengaluru, so that you know that, in a suitcase.
The other week we had somebody turn up an hour early
to make badges.
To the hackathon to make badges.
His mum dropped him here from the western suburbs because he had all these badges made. And I said, okay, you're in charge of the badge machine now. Off you go. Yeah.
I was just going to ask if you have the certain cut already.
We do. We pre-cut, because it also means that you don't have to stare at a white piece of paper. For any artists or art educators in here, you know, the white piece of paper can be something that puts you off, and then you see the materials. And so because it's not a drawing as such, even though it is, there's just a quick win in there. And we can start to talk about what activism is and how tiny activisms can actually do the work of hacking the Anthropocene in a way that you might not have thought of before. And, you know, as kids from the 80s, badges are life. They tell people who you are without you really having to do too much.
I had a really dumb and simple question. With the method of the hack, when you say you play a card, like, what does that mean? Are you guys like sitting down in a room and you pull it off a pile and say, okay,
literally, yes,
doing this? So could you just talk a little bit more to that method for the entirely uninitiated, like particularly like what it looks like on the day in the room?
Didn't bring
Are
any.
you in a room?
We didn't bring any. Yeah.
I know you had 3 additional ones.
Yes.
How did you come up with the original, you know, the walking and the
Well, they're just methods that are a part of our practice and have been for some time. So they're a part, well, they're kind of used by arts-based researchers in a way. Some of them exist as formal methods in qualitative or post-qualitative research, and particularly research creation. They're our version of it as artographers in this site. So where we work here with teacher educators, and they really are coming from the fact that what does it look like to teach in teacher education in a radical pedagogy? And those radical pedagogies then are driven by methods, and they're not driven by content, because there is no content. You're teaching in anthropogenic times, and so the content itself is co-generated by people. And so I've been walking as an educator with students for a long time. They've been mapping with me. Sarah and I started teaching together. There were different methods that then folded in. And then we just keep working on those methods until they grow. And we turned them into cards because inviting teachers into the method is a different thing, because they're already artists and designers. So they already have a practice that we fold, and we fold that practice into the method, into pedagogy. That folding can't happen with people who are not artists, and we work predominantly, often with lots of scientists. And so the card is a mediator. And because we work with Science Gallery, that concept of mediation is what they do. It's literally their job to mediate a science/artwork inside a science gallery that's not really a gallery and not really a science space. So they're already doing all the pluri work. And so you need something that's exchangeable. So the cards become the game, and the game can then be played, but it's played as co-researchers. And it just means that you've got an encounter to return to. And the protocols are written on the cards. So they know that, to use a really crude term, it's like we train people in the methodology with us. And the cards enable that training, but it's not training when you do participatory co-design research. It's just something that locates us. And it really has been over many, many years. You know, it's not things that we've just developed really quickly. It's slow pedagogy work, and it's done literally as research with multiple cohorts of people until you get to this point. And then what we decided was, okay, you had to draw a line in the sand. They were our 10 methods. What are the methods that fall after? And when they play the off-piste card, they can choose that to be a new method, or they can just develop one on their own. And so that's why the performance one is interesting, because it includes multiple actors in the method exchange when Stella comes into that conversation, purely accidentally. And then it changes the way that that card might be played. And then our designer, Jen, who's here tonight, is truly co-designing with us at the same time. So there's things that are happening where they're pushing back on some things that are sitting around it. The image is co-generated with us and Deep Dream predominantly, but other image generators and AI. So even the image is then pushing the way things might work. Chatty G might interrupt and say, maybe you should write that card differently. And so that then changes, and we just keep moving in the non-human, more than human, human space until we land on a card and know it's it, and that's what gets played. And the first thing you do is open the kit. So the first part of the game basically is you get your box, you open up your kit, and we let them unbox, and they literally pull out everything that's filled with a normal kind of speculative design kit, something else I have taught with for a long time. And then they go through the cards, and it's like they've got a Christmas present. Like, it's the most magical thing to watch. Like, you got to see a little bit of Jen unboxing for you, but that's what you do when you unbox yourself. And the young people we work with all know how to unbox. Like, they unbox like they're being filmed, and someone usually is sitting there with a phone filming the unboxing and doing the talk over like an unboxing on TikTok, and usually ends up that way anyway. But it's a part of their practice because they know how to work like that. Yeah. Did that answer both of them? Yeah.
Whatever.
Yes, you actually have cards, so they're proper playing cards.
You came up with the cards,
Yes,
based on your experience, and then you've created these boxes, and then the people who participate sort of generate the flow of like, whether it's going to be focused on climate or whether it's going to be like, so
we do that. We're provoking continuously and shifting the way that the box moves.
To read the room, and then and be sort of responsive to that, which is what we don't do in schools because we have all the presets.
So that's where we'll play a different card. And so we'll interrupt with cards sometimes combination of two cards. Sometimes they can play a card back. And then what does it look like to go off piste for them instead of following this method? And within all of the methods, they have to do their own. We have 6 protocols for research. They follow the same 6 protocols. They have a little journal that they use. And those journals document their process within, not dissimilar to the way that the visual art and design teachers in secondary here learn to be teachers, with their journals and zine making continuously moving in and out. And so the research is doing the same thing. The thing that we're doing is working with people who are going to work as educators. And so how do you know how to mediate inside a gallery without an education background? And it's not education, because I don't like teaching education. I think it's interesting to think about what pedagogical encounters are and what they might be. And so the box just becomes a pedagogical encounter. It's a, Anna Craft place of possibility, and that possibility thinking lets you go once you play the cards in a different way. And the way they unbox will design on what happens. We'll design what happens after. Because if they unbox and leave the cards, there's a bunch of beautiful cards that do other things. And so if you read them, you obviously have a different narrative. If you read the cards first, you have a different narrative. And then we'll interrupt.
But it's not all free flow. Like, sometimes we start off and play one card as a collective
for 3 hours,
especially with the walking, because when you're new to something and you're with a group that has never encountered this way of being really relational and doing relational pedagogy together, then you do have to bring people along with you.
And you can't have an epistemic break early or they're done. So if the epistemic break comes too fast, you lose half of them. And in a hackathon over days, they just won't come back. And we'll often lose the ones who have a full existential crisis and they're out. You know, with teachers, you have longer time. We only have 4 3-hour sessions. And so we have to time carefully where the break will happen, and we need the crack to occur because otherwise we can't do the meaningful work that follows. So we're taking them always to the point where we break them, knowing that we break them. And the break is a kind of moment of being able to look at yourself in a different way. I call gazing. But that moment of gazing around and inside and outside and backward and forward lets you do the next piece if we land it right. So we have to then decide what card comes next.
Maybe not break, maybe snap.
I'm totally into break. I think I tell my teachers all the time when I've broken them, and I know that I've done it.
Do the interrupting with one last question, because I know that we are at time, and I then want to say something about the next one. So
It was more a comment.
Because I know we like more
work
of a
with
comment
these
than a
guys
question.
quite a bit, and
Comment.
one thing that I've learned a lot from these guys is the idea of provocations. So I'm thinking what that whole conversation was about almost was instead of telling students what they're going to do, you set a provocation.
Yeah, and wait for them to tell you something back.
that's a beautiful thing.
It's not that radical. It's called radical pedagogy. It's not radical. It's just being a good human being.
And what you've reminded me of too is in the philosophies that I've been using, Christeva is a strong component, and she uses this term of she doesn't actually use mini revolts, but she uses the term of revolt.
Yes.
And the revolts, little personal revolts that you do for yourself, which I then started calling mini revolts. And I think that a lot of what you've been talking about is those things that you know, every badge can be a little mini revolt, and every little thing that you're doing when you go back to your classroom, when you go back home, or you go down the street is also...
You can't pull 2 artists out of the 90s and take away Christeva and not say that it had an impact.
Right,
that's just our underpinning.
That is our underpinning. So I just wanted to say that while you were talking, I put in my diary that we need to get in touch next year for the follow-on of this, and we'll continue this conversation because it's not done.
Really complex work.
It's definitely
very
not
hard
done,
to
and
explain,
it's really exciting.
because you have to just pull one slice of cake out.
Yeah.
And there's a whole really good cake. I would really like to tell the story on.
We didn't even tell you half the story.
We'll have more cake next year. And remember that this recording is going to go onto our YouTube channel. So it'll be available for all of the people who didn't make it here tonight.
Yeah.
And
Thank you.
share the link.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you, Nicola. Thank you.